Following the initial intention, there was further feedback received and discussed, and it was determined to defer the addition until the tariff code could differentiate between high sugar cereals from healthy cereals. And so we did not wish to penalize healthy breakfast cereals and inadvertently penalize families that are trying to do the right thing. So those that, like Honey Nut Cheerios, for example, you can carry on. There was also a question in terms of fruit juices, and I'm trying to make sure I get this correct. So if they are 100% fruit juices, the duty is 5% based on the nutritional value. So there is some element in that regard. But I take your point clearly, Madam President, in terms of the lesser sugar content beverages should be encouraged to be consumed. And the one thing I think we miss, all of us, certainly, is that the least expensive beverage is probably the most abundant one, which is water, and to encourage us to drink more water. Two, there was also a question in terms of, I actually answered earlier about the duty. The duty is in charge. The duty is charged, as I said earlier, on the value of what you're buying. It doesn't include all of the shipping and the rest of it. And then there's a question. I think I might have repeated this one. Sorry. 13. And I think that's a repeat. Okay. And Madam President, Senator Simmons asked a question in terms of, will the Minister of Finance consider further relief on healthy goods? And I think that is yes. Sorry, Madam President. That answer is yes. And for the government, it's a question, as I think I read earlier, of reducing the duty on various goods is going to cause reduction in government revenue, and there's going to have to be some offset. Having said that, the consideration also is what, as Senator Campbell said earlier, the bigger picture, and so we have to now do some more work, of course, to make sure that we can make the correct decisions in terms of, is there going to be a direct correlation between reducing the value of so-called healthy goods to an absolute minimum, and how would that be compensated either in reduced health costs or other revenue? And I will say again from my earlier comments, one of the activities of the Price Control Commission is to look at some of Bermuda's prices, and I will say again that there is no question of us trying to impose price controls, but there is the intention to ensure that prices are not unnecessarily high or price gouged, because that's not going to be appropriate either. And I know I always use the example of grapes. Grapes are not inexpensive, and the reality is, are they at an appropriate price or not? And unfortunately for all of us, it seems as though the grapes are on the shelf on, let's say, a Thursday, and by Saturday they're going brown or something. And so we have to really understand that. And I was interested to hear also, and I hope I got this right, is that things, for example, like apples, they're actually grown once a year. And so they're actually stored once they're picked until they're needed. And so, it's not as though you pick apples every month, for example. And so we have to understand some of the items or some of the realities of food. We always talk, of course, in terms of, you have to buy the product overseas and you got to ship it here and do all those kind of things. And so, again, the idea now is to try to ensure that we understand the pricing mechanisms for the local providers, and also to ensure that the consumers are aware of the nature, the components of prices, and hopefully in a bigger way to change purchasing habits where necessary, because this will all have an impact on the sugar tax that we're talking about, or the impact of those goods. And so I want to conclude by saying that clearly this is not an intention from government to penalize individual consumption, like penalize, trying to encourage us to make healthier choices so that in the longer run, Bermuda will benefit from reduced healthcare costs, because ultimately we all do pay the price for poor health choices because the health system has to then bear the brunt of the overall care, and of course that's reflected in our health premiums and all that kind of stuff. So, Madam President, I think I have answered all comments or questions.
Senator Kemp, there's a question that you wanted a response or haven't had a
Yes,
response from.
thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senator Richardson. My question was asked about I think I got a bit of an answer with the comment on breakfast cereal, that cereals that have a lot of added sugar and a minute amount of added sugar. So I think that answers my question about the per kilo rate. So, but I guess it goes to bear if you're getting a snack bar, one that has a drop of honey and high quality ingredients will suffer a 75% increase based on its purchase price, as well as a candy bar that is mostly sugar. This act does not distinguish between snack items that are healthier, clarity on how the duty is assessed and the unintended consequences.
Madam President, may I just confer?
Yes, you certainly may, Senator Richardson. You can confer with your people. I don't mind the back and forth because we've got a lot of time.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So he's, yeah. So I acknowledge that they're in the chamber, really. Right. It's not a chamber rather than, say, gallery. I know, that's right, yeah. Right. Senator Richardson, I believe you have a response.
Madam President, the response is that there is the intention to try to differentiate based upon the quantity of sugar in certain products, and I was interested to learn that honey is not deemed to be sugar, and so those products will not be impacted. But to address Senator Kemp's comments, question directly, is that some of the goods that are imported, the customs officers are able to distinguish based upon the content which tariff code to use, and they'll exercise that discretion because the intent is not to negatively impact items, in this case, not candy bars, but snack bars that don't have sugar. And as the brief said, there is the intention to do some more work because the tariff codes themselves are fairly rigid, and it's not going to be as easy as we may think, or at least as immediate, to try to change the actual tariff codes, and so they'll continue to work until we can, get this a little bit more efficient.
Thank you, Senator Richardson. Now you do your second reading.
Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Customs Tariff Amendment Bill 2019 be now read a second time.
Is there an objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that Standing Order 26 be suspended in respect of this bill.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Customs Tariff Amendment Bill 2019 be now read a third time.
Is there an objection to the third reading? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the bill do now pass.
It has been moved that the bill entitled Customs Tariff Amendment Act 2019 do now pass. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The bill is passed. And thank you, Senator Richardson, for the time you've taken to answer questions. And we'll move now, Senators, to the third item on the orders of the day, and that is the Customs Tariff Amendment Number 2 Act 2019. Senator Campbell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Customs Tariff Amendment Number 2 Act 2019 be now read a second time.
Is there an objection to that? No objection. Carry on, Senator Campbell.
Madam President, this bill proposes to amend the Customs Tariff Act 1970, the Principal Act, with measures that include 1. Increasing the import duty rates for alcoholic beverages and tobacco products. 2. Amending certain end-use relief. These measures affect the first and fifth schedules to the Principal Act. Madam President, in the budget statement in support of the estimates of revenue and expenditure 2019-2020, the government promised to raise the duty on cigarettes and tobacco and on beer, wines, and spirits. The increased duty rate is expected to achieve additional customs revenue of about $1.5 to $2.5 million. Accordingly, the bill proposes the following duty increases. Madam President, the duty on beer and cider will be increased by 10 cents from $1.26 per liter to $1.36 per liter. The duty on wines will be increased by $1 from $5 per liter to $6 per liter. The duty on spirits, liquors, and cordials will be increased by 65 cents from $31.35 per liter of alcohol to $32 per liter of alcohol. The duty on cigarettes will increase by 3 cents per cigarette from 37 cents to 40 cents per cigarette, or $80 per carton of 200. Madam President, the duty on all other tobacco products, except cigars, cheroots, and cigarillos, will increase to $500 per kilogram in order to achieve effective parity with the duty rate for cigarettes. And if anyone's wondering what a cheroot is, it's a cigar with both ends that are clipped, they're open, and it's untapered. So, really good.
We're duly edified.
This sounds more like a vegetable. That's why I had to look it up. Madam President, I now progress to the measures of the bill concerning end-use reliefs. Madam President, in the budget statement, it was pointed out that the most significant items of capital development expenditure in the 2019-2020 budget included schools maintenance, the 3.0 million. In order to help that expenditure go that much farther, the bill proposes to add the following items to the list of qualifying goods under CPC 4110, which provides duty relief for school equipment and educational supplies. Lighting fixtures, wall clocks, network equipment and cabling, telephones, flooring materials and systems, security cameras, plumbing, drywall supplies, dollies and casters, doors, windows, and their frames and thresholds for doors. Madam President, the bill also proposes to amend CPC 4195, which currently provides duty relief for chemicals, products, and equipment for combating oil pollution. It is intended to widen the scope of relief under CPC 4195 to include all goods for combating pollution. As a control measure, the environmental engineer of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources shall certify that goods are eligible for this expanded relief. Madam President, I would take this opportunity to mention that Bermuda Customs puts into practice a recommendation of the World Customs Organization aimed at speeding up the forwarding of goods in the event of disasters, including pollution events. In the case of imports, Customs permits the duty-free release of goods on presentation of the relevant cargo manifest. No import declaration or monetary security is required upon the importation of relief consignments. No export declaration is required for temporary imports of emergency items. Guidance on Customs import procedures for goods for disaster management and humanitarian aid can be accessed on the government portal. Madam President, the bill further proposes to amend CPC 4215, which provides duty relief for goods for commercial food production. It is intended to widen the relief to allow the duty-free importation of retail packaging of local animal and vegetable products. The predominant packaging method for local produce is clear clamshell packaging. Such packages are largely supplied to commercial farmers via the DENR Agriculture Service Center. The packaging is designed to keep local produce clean and safe for human consumption in order to ensure high quality and to prolong shelf life. This expended relief will help to reduce local food production costs, allowing local farmers to better compete with cheaper overseas imports. Madam President, the bill also proposes to amend CPC 4196 to provide further duty relief on medical equipment and supplies in relation to goods used to compensate for a physical, mental, or learning disability by extending 98.03 and in the Fifth Schedule to the Principal Act. In the simplified tariff, the tariff code for footwear and watches is to be split into two separate tariff codes, one for footwear and one for watches. This split is revenue neutral. Also, Madam President, the tariff code for smoking tobacco and cigars is similarly split, and the new $500 per kilogram rate is applied to smoking tobacco. Cigars will remain dutiable at 35% of the value. Madam President, in the Fifth Schedule, it is proposed to correct a small number of outdated references to the Director of the Department of Environmental Protection. The new style is correctly the Director of the Department of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources. And with that, I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Campbell. Would any senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Kemp, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Senator Campbell, for your presentation. I have a couple questions as relates to this bill. One of the ones, when I look at CPC 4110, which is on page 3 of the copy we have, I note that the eligible beneficiary is all importers, and there's such things as classroom and office stationery, art equipment, supplies, sports, physical education, and recreational equipment, which are items that pretty much any parent of a school-age child could purchase. So I guess I'd like to know, seeing as it's not limited to just teachers or just schools that are purchasing this stuff, is the onus that's going to be put on the Commissioner of Education to certify the goods that are eligible for this relief going to be cumbersome? It's a very large pool of eligible beneficiaries, and so I'm worried that the scope of relief and the burden being put on the Commissioner could cause a lot of unnecessary bureaucracy, and I just wanted to get some more clarity around the eligible beneficiaries and the end-use restrictions. I also like to talk about the heads on page 2 of the copy we have. Head 9803. I note with curiosity that cigars and cigarillos and stuff have a 35% rate, whereas we're taxing items with any added sugar at 75%. It just seems an interesting contradiction. I'd also like to point out that smoking tobacco, or otherwise I guess known as lib, is at $500 a kilo, and my concern is pre-rolled cigarettes to a loose smoking tobacco in order to curb their consumption of tobacco. Self-rolled cigarettes as a reduction of consumption strategy.
Thank you, Senator Kemp. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Jardine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I just had one question, and it's on page 2, dealing with the 9803, 141, and 443 on footwear and watches. I understood the senator's comments that the changes were revenue neutral. I was interested to know what the change was on duty rates for watches, which are now stated at 12.5%. I don't recall what the other rate was, but I do recall some while ago, I believe it was last year, it may have been the year before, when changes were made to this particular category, there was concern expressed by some of the retailers on the island who sell watches principally to tourists who come here. Because of our competitive duty rate, they were able to sell them at a reduced price when compared to the United States, and so this was a very significant part of their business. And so I would be concerned if this rate of 12.5% was significantly more than what the rate was last year, because it will harm their businesses. If it is the same rate, then that's fine, but I just asked that question. I did not have an opportunity last night to go online and check what the old rate was, so I'd be anxious for an answer on that question. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Jardine. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Kemp, do you have additional
Yes, and I know I'm not allowed an extra bite of the chair, but I just wanted to point out what I feel may be an errata in the bill. Under head 9803-141 and 143, this is replacing 9803-141, which levied the duty rate on unit of classification a unit. It's now being levied on a kilo. So you're going to pay 6.5% per kilo of shoes and 12.5% per kilo of watches, which seems rather counterintuitive.
Thank you, Senator Kemp. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? No? Then we'll wait for Senator Campbell to get the answers to the questions that have been raised. Senator Campbell, I see you're back in the chair. You have answers to
I have a couple of answers, yes.
You have the floor.
In reference to Senator Jardine's question, the duty on watches and shoes hasn't changed. That's just to give each category its own separate code or tariff code. So that hasn't changed. I am told that the kilo reference in that area will be changed. It's an error, and it will be corrected. So hopefully that alleviates any fears in that area. The rate of 35% on cigars was left in place from a tourism perspective, and as it relates to, I think, the tobacco itself, the loose tobacco, as opposed to this here closes a loophole whereby the government was losing a few $1 million a year in revenue. So this closes that loophole. I am waiting for further clarification when it comes to whether this will be burdensome on the Commission of Education.
President, I'm not sure if this is a point of order or a point of clarification.
What is your point of clarification?
The member stated that, as relates to the new heads 9803, 141, and 143, that it was both revenue neutral and did not change the existing tariff. However, 9803, 141, if I have the correct copy of the customs tariff in front of me, appears to be a consolidated rate, as one would expect, as it was 1, and it is listed at 12.5%. 5%. So one of the footwear is now being desegregated from the combined tariff code, and it's at a lower rate. So it's neither revenue neutral, nor is it the same rate.
Thank you, Senator Kemp. We await a response to the additional question. I think we'll be finished before 12 o'clock. Senator Campbell, you have...
Thank you, Madam President.
You're welcome.
In reference to whether this will be burdensome to the Commissioner of Education, I'm advised that the end user must be registered under Section 12 of the Education Act, 1996, which basically means schools. I'm also being told that when it comes to footwear, it ties back to Schedule 1, the first schedule, and the duty rate in that schedule is 6.5%. And the 12.5% that we see was related more to couriers than the average person bringing.
Point of clarification?
You're accepting a point of clarification?
Not at
Mr.
this
Campbell?
time, Madam President.
We carry on then and move you.
I guess a point of order then, Madam President. The member may be misadvertently misleading the House. The tariff code that's being amended in this act that's before us amends Chapter 98, which is for couriers. So any footwear brought in through a courier will now be 6.5% instead of 12.5%, which will result in a decline in revenue.
Madam President, I'm advised that the couriers have the option to go to the first schedule and bring the goods in at 6.5%, and that's what they would do rather than bring it in at the higher rate. So that's what I'm advised, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Campbell. You'll now move on to the bill, the second reading.
Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Customs Tariff Amendment Number 2 Act 2019 be now read a second time.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. Carry on, Senator Campbell.
Madam President, I move that Standing Order 26 be now suspended in reference to the bill.
Is there an objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the Customs Tariff Amendment Number 2 Act 2019 be now read a third time.
Is there any objection to the third reading? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the bill do now pass.
It has been moved that the bill entitled the Customs Tariff Amendment Number 2 Act 2019 do now pass. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The bill is passed. Thank you, Senator Campbell. Moving on to the orders of the day, item number 14, motions. There are none. Item number 15, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches. Would any senator care to speak on this? Senator Richardson, you have the floor.
Madam President, just a brief congratulations which is extended to the Bermuda College generally, in particular Dr. Curtis Tweed, Dr. Green, and the other support staff persons on the introduction of the Phi Theta Kappa sorority. And they did it on the basis of the persons that were inducted, the children, the students that were inducted. They were done on the basis of academic excellence. And I emphasize the fact that there were, I think, 12 persons that were inducted, and some of the students were dual enrollment students. And the implication is, or the fact rather, is that some children will go to, say, Berkeley and Cedar Bridge and Bermuda College, and their grades were higher than full-time students at Bermuda College. And so the reality is students that are aged, say, 16, 17, and maybe some 18 would more than adequately compete at the college level and be able to attain high grades to be inducted into the sorority. And sometimes, well, I do sometimes here, is we don't give appropriate credit to these successes. And so again, I say congratulations to the Bermuda College for the work that they are doing on behalf of our young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Richardson. Would any other senator care to speak? Madam AG, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to send best wishes to the players and parents and coaches for the Kappa football tournament that I believe is taking place over this weekend. As a mother of footballers, I remember many years of attending this tournament with all the early morning preparations and anxiety during the day, but it's truly a wonderful tournament that draws a huge support from members of the community. And so to the fraternity, well done once again. And to the children, youngsters I should say, I wish them all the best for an enjoyable tournament and that they maintain their sportsmanship and enjoy the occasion. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam AG, and I'm sure all senators will join you in those comments. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion? Congratulatory and or obituary speeches? If not, we'll move on to adjournment. Madam AG.
Madam President, yes, I move that we adjourn to Wednesday, May 8th.
Would any senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn?
If I may, Madam President?
Yes, you may, certainly.
I'd like to take this opportunity as we rise to thank the government technical officers and the Ministry of Finance for the work that they did in preparation of the heads for the budget debate this year. I'd also like to acknowledge the Parliamentary Council who have worked tirelessly once again to move the government's legislative agenda. So on behalf of the Senate, and special thanks to my team today, Mr. Monty Lawrence, and I'll say this, there are times that Parliamentary Council go far above their responsibility to draft legislation and actually aid ministries and permanent secretaries in other areas, particularly with respect to the brief. And so my team is very dedicated to making sure that we give a thorough briefing in terms of the agenda that we advance with respect to our legislation. And so to Ms. Lawrence, thank you very much, as to the rest of the team. And on behalf of the Senate, we look forward to the next session and the collaboration that ensures that we all are successful. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam AG. And with that, Senate stands adjourned to May the 8th. Enjoy the recess. Thank you.